Hello. Today I'm very pleased to host my good friend and fellow founder, Yura Riphyak,
Hey, what's
with
up?
us today. So Yura is a Y Combinator alum and a serial entrepreneur. He's from Ukraine and he is currently the co-founder of YouTeam and Heart. And Yura, in addition to starting these great companies, is also a mentor at the YC Startup School and lectures at several universities worldwide. So, Yura, welcome to the
Hey,
show.
thanks for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so just want to share some very interesting quick story about how we met. How we met is actually quite interesting. What happened was, well, while I've been on this spiritual slash meditative journey for the past few years, so one day, maybe last year, I somehow had this naive question pop up. So I actually went to the YC internal community and posted this very weird question about is there any enlightened being within YC? I guess maybe many founders were quite amazed by this amusing question, but there's actually a lot of interesting responses. And you're actually one of the few founders who have actually reached out to me, and that's how we
Yeah,
met
from
officially,
from from another
actually.
POV, it was like, oh my God, someone posted something about meditation and mindfulness on Bookface. And then I opened it, and it's this guy who is also doing a marketplace for hiring engineers. It's like, how do you have match, on like both categories? So I just had to reach out after that.
Yeah, and how we met is actually quite fascinating because our companies are actually semi-competitive. So maybe we can talk a little bit about your view about competition. But maybe before we dive in, I'm just curious about maybe you can share with everybody how's your life has been so far and how did you start with your entrepreneurial
Ooh,
journey?
where do I start? I'm currently reading Charles Bukowski, Hammond Rai, and he starts, the first page. Like my very first memory is like I'm 3 years old, sitting under the table and like looking at the huge legs of adults. Uh, mine is different, but I think like we can fast forward like couple of years. So I was born in Lviv, Ukraine, and I think like my journey as an entrepreneur started when I was 10 years old, and I was selling plastic buckets on the market. So, and I was surprisingly successful. I don't know why, but like I was selling very fast. So I think that's the first time I caught this gem. Then actually at school I built a game which was like Dungeons and Dragons, but it was like two notebooks, very complicated with a lot of players. I wasn't the only one who was doing that at that time, but I was the only one who started charging money for participation, like selling tickets. And that was like the first experience of, Y Combinator motto: build something people want. When people actually, you created something out of thin air, in a couple of notebooks and pens, and like people start paying money to be part of it. So that was really life changing. I think I was like 12 or 13. And then I went on, starting my I had a hip hop band in high school, so there was like another take on it. We were called Chocolate Tomato, and we had two like really hit songs. We even got like second place on the regional song contest. So I remember that moment of triumph when we like there was this like old Soviet building, and everything was held. Our second place was actually the first place, because the first place were the band who were the kids of organizers of the show. So it was already decided. So our second place, what I was actually counting, and like we exit the building, and there is like crowd of our friends like applauding us, like chanting something, and so on. So yeah, then I went on. I think like I started my first company when I was 25, and it was really funny thing because we tried to sell consulting services to small businesses, basically to dentists, like a little nail salons and so on, things. So we were like McKinsey for the poor. Obviously it didn't work because like, but it took us some time to learn that consulting and small business is actually an oxymoron. So we pivoted to something else, which was like organizing events, and that was quite successful. So we did a couple of international conferences, and then like we went on winning, like helping basically co-winning a bid for the Worldwide Beekeeping Congress to be held in Kiev, which was the biggest international event after Eurovision ever held in Ukraine. So this was a huge deal. We also developed a special software for abstract management because it's a big scientific conference with like thousands of participants. It's really huge. You should look it up. It's called Apimondia. It's called like Olympic Games every 2 years.
Mm.
So it yeah, and like after that, I basically exited this company. I shut it down after we got the money from that congress, and like started something else. I call it exit, even though technically it's not. Then I worked for some time for like a family office, helping with investment. So I basically entered the startup world from VC door until like the guy
Mm.
who was the head of this office, whose like money I was mm, basically saving from imprudent investment. That's basically where I see the most value. We co-founded with him a Twitter for Voice. So it was like Clubhouse many years before Clubhouse. Very wrong place, very wrong time. But I
Mm.
didn't know that. It was a fascinating journey. We built an actual social network which was like Twitter for Voice. So instead of short Twitter messages, you have short 30-second voice messages. And we got surprising traction from Middle East. It was Arab Spring, and it turned out like in particular from Iran, from Egypt. So I even hired a person speaking Farsi and Arabic to like understand what people are talking about there, and it turned out like they were
Oh.
discussing how to overthrow the government. So we
Oh.
started talking to them, like doing customer development sessions, and it turned out that they Facebook, Twitter, all other traditional like social media, they were quite dangerous if you want to overthrow the government or if you are like doing any kind of dangerous stuff, because they were helping. The way the social networks are built is actually super helpful to governments if they want to squash the rebellion. You don't have to torture anyone anymore. You
Mm.
just look at their Facebook connections, like who's in their friend list or who's following them, and you get the whole network, at once. With us, it wasn't possible because we were a voice social network and there was no search available in particular, and there was like some additional security that we had. So it was pretty cool, but as you can imagine, it was impossible to monetize. So we shut it
Mm.
down after some time. But I was also trying to like raise additional money for it, and that brought me to London, where I studied before. And I was like trying to raise money for this company, Hub. I was meeting a lot of startup founders. I was trying to meet a lot of investors, but instead I was meeting a lot of startup founders, like on these events when I was trying to meet investors. And I found out that there is other problem, but raising money. Like people actually struggle hiring engineers, and like we started first kind of consulting agency. We called us we are failed founders who help other founders fail a little bit later, like extend their agony. That was unofficial motto. So again, dentists, fashion models starting their startups, all things in London. It was fun. It actually made a little bit of money. I was able to pay my rent and so on, but not until 2 years later when we actually discovered that the essence of our business is not consulting, it's hiring engineers, finding the right contractors. And it's a big problem because like either you, like as a startup, you are in these like crossroads. You either can hire someone full time or you can hire them fast, and there is no in between. But we kind of found in between, and there's this is now very famous company already. If you go to London, you travel by tube, by underground. Basically, they are now buying half of all ads. It's called Tide Banking. It's one of the first mobile business to business mobile banks. But when we met them, it was like a very humble beginnings. They were about to shut down because they almost ran out of money, and like they hired some company somewhere
Mm.
which screwed things up instead of developing software for them. So they had very little to lose, and so did we. So and they were okay. If you guys find us like four engineers by the end of the week, then you have the deal. And at that time, I had about 10 agencies in Ukraine that we worked as an extension of our consulting offer. And I just started calling them, do you have an engineer? Do you have an engineer? Do you have an engineer? And it turned out we put together a team. The team did really well, built the product, they raised money, and now it's a multi-billion company. So this is kind of spawned this new idea that there is this entire market of hidden talent when you have these like hundreds of consulting companies, and they actually have engineers available, something which is not obvious because they're finishing their projects or they just hate what they're doing and they want to switch. So
Hmm.
if you and it kind of calls for a marketplace case, right? If you can add like a systemic integrator to this market which would pull the supply over this entire vast talent pool and connect it with demand, could be an interesting business. So that's what we did. That's how YouTeam was born, and it actually went really well. So in less than 2 months we were already like making 20K per month only with Google spreadsheets and like no software, and growing pretty fast. So we got to YC the next year, and yeah, the rest is history. Like, this company is doing very well right now. We're around 12 million GMV. We had over 300 clients, a lot of YC companies as clients. And now, like, the latest development, maybe if we have time we can talk later, we're now working on AI recruiter, like turning it all upside down and trying follow the zeitgeist. That was 12 minutes, man. I hope you forgive me,
Fascinating.
but you asked for my entire life story. And
Yes. That's a wonderful soliloquy, like 10-minute long soliloquy, fast, like highlighting your life story. This is wonderful. So, since you're a serial entrepreneur, I guess startup founders, we start up companies for different reasons, right? Some do so because there are certain problems that we face that we want to solve ourselves. Some want to change the world, like make a dent in the universe, and some just want to become multi-billionaires. So I guess I'm wondering, in your case, what has been your calling, and why did you keep on starting
this is an
startups?
amazing question, and it correlates with overall topic of mindfulness in a peculiar ways. Actually, at some point, I was curious myself, and I was basically every time I met a startup founder, I was asking them this question, like, why are you doing this, right? Because it's like a deeply irrational activity. If you want to make money, it's probably one of the worst ways to make money and to become rich, just because like the risks are so high and you actually work a lot. So you can like start normal kosher business and so on. And like my conclusion was, and I think this applies to me. So when I was little, I liked to read books a lot. I was obsessed. I was consuming them in huge quantities. All kinds of books, like from, like index encyclopedias, like this kind of stuff, up to like all different kinds of, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and other literature. It was before Harry Potter. So yeah. And I think this is why it's like, if you want your kids to live normal life and not a life of a founder starting startups, you have to limit the amount of books they read. Because if you read too many books as a kid, you start to believe in this heroic fabula, right? Like, every book is built around the hero. There is this hero, there are journeys, they overcome obstacles, they slay monsters, they jump over traps, and then they emerge somehow like victorious. The problem is, in today's life, we don't have monsters anymore, right? All monsters are either killed or sit at the zoos.
Mm.
So we live in a very safe and very boring world. So some people who read a lot of books, they decide to create those obstacles for themselves, so they can then overcome them and like emerge victorious out of it. And yeah, I feel we all want to be a hero. We all want to be protagonists, right? In this book, not a sideline, not a footnote. We want to be the main hero, and like that's one of the ways to do it in the current circumstances.
This is a fascinating way to put this. I've never really thought like this before. Basically, you're highlighting, I guess, one way to look at this world is we're all creating our own stories, and we're basically, of course, by as a default, we are the protagonist. We are the hero in our journey when we almost always artificially create this hero's journey for us to experience, to go through, right?
Sure.
Either consciously
If you
or
believe in
subconsciously.
determinism, then we are not actually creating this story. We're more like a device that plays and executes the script which is already written and like keeps being written. So it's something like playing a video game, right? But this video game is actually not a video game. It's more like a movie, but we have a very convincing illusion of
Yeah,
agency that we are controlling this main
yeah,
character.
yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, because I've been playing around with ChatGPT quite a lot these days, I've come to the realization that human beings are actually just LLMs. And 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 what's interesting is actually you can try we can experiment this later, but you can actually program yourself. You can actually prompt engineer yourself to behave subconsciously however you like it to be.
Through stories.
I've been experimenting with that
Well, there
through
is
thoughts
a
and
whole
beliefs.
school of psychology.
So,
It's a dominant school of psychology right now. It's called CBT. Nothing to do with cannabis.
ah,
It's cognitive behavioral therapy. And the whole idea is that the way we perceive the world is that we have a bunch of stories that we're telling ourselves. And these stories have unconscious origins. We like very few people actually question themselves, like where does their worldview come from? But you can start questioning yourself, and that's how you see the source code, of like what's your reality, how is
yeah,
it built. And once you see the source code, you can start altering it. And it does, like, one of the things which is kind of inconvenient is that you cannot change them at once, right? But if you adopt like this as a habit, it's like exercising a muscle, right? Or a diet or learning stuff.
yeah,
So over time you can counter destructive stories which make it things harder for you, which make you unhappy. You can counter with stories which are more constructive, of your own design. And after some time it starts working. So that's the essence of CBT. Is that what you mean by programming yourself?
yeah, yeah. And because I come from a completely different angle, because one thing I realized that too many of us have actually deep core constraining beliefs that we do not know that they exist. And but then the key here is that if you can be very conscious and somehow try to discover those beliefs as actual beliefs as not real, if you can actually relax those beliefs, or you can just even better dissolving those beliefs for good, then that's your essentially one more step towards complete freedom, right? And now we don't even talk about spiritual journey or spiritual accomplishment, even worldly accomplishments, right? This doesn't have to be spiritual, right? We too many of us tell us stories subconsciously that we just naturally believe in. You can go something like maybe a lot of times that maybe you're not making progress in your startup because you fundamentally don't believe you will be successful in this for various reasons. But if you can dig deep down inside, you'll realize that those are just core beliefs that are very deep in your subconsciousness that you do not realize that they exist. But if you can uproot those, that's going to be you. It's almost like putting off a very heavy weight from your shoulder, and you feel much lighter, and you can be freer to accomplish whatever you desire.
Absolutely. It's a question of choice, right? Once you can name the dragon, you can slay it, like in that tale. So
Yeah,
it's important to realize, because it's quite counterintuitive, right? That like our brain and our entire perception apparatus is not built for perceiving reality. Like, yes, I think Jeffrey, oh my God, Jeffrey Bezos put it. Humans are not truth-seeking animals; we're social animals. I would add to it, we are also storytelling animals. So, like the way we
Yeah.
perceive reality is we don't perceive it directly. Like for example, like this computer, right? This camera I'm looking at. In reality, it's mostly empty space. It's an array of atoms. But I have a concept, right, which is in my brain. The way I should
Yeah.
perceive it. And I perceive this concept, a story about it, like what it does, what it's built from, what color it is, and so on. That's pretty much, if this is true for the physical world, right? When we have physical proxies, which you can actually perceive directly, we can touch them and so on, then this is even more true and a little bit more intuitive for abstract stuff. Like, what is the meaning of life? Like why we're doing what we're doing, where do we come from, and so on.
Yeah.
So these are like softer stories. It's hard to convince to teach yourself to see atoms, right, instead of seeing a table or a computer, but it's much easier to switch the story about, like, mm, let's say, are you happy, are you successful, or are you not? Like, are you a good human being, or are you always guilty of something, and so on. Like all these little narratives, right, that become obstacles.
Hmm. Since we're already deep into the topics of spirituality and
Drift.
meditations already, I guess before we step further down this path, is there any other worldly things that you think we should be talking about? Um,
People well, I think people won't forgive us if we don't talk about AI, at least a little.
yeah, please.
You
So
also had some
you were
political
one of
topics, I remember, that
the
you wanted to discuss. So, but it's up to you.
yeah, so maybe we can talk about when we first met, I was fascinated. You're essentially like the Ukrainian version of us, right? You're from Ukraine. You team, almost the entire team is from Ukraine. Where I'm originally from Taiwan. We're a global team, but we do have a sizable team in Taiwan as well. So it seems like we're brothers from two different geographical regions. And you can share with us like the crazy stories about Ukraine and how you guys managed to handle the situations over there?
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for bringing this up, because people start forgetting, right? So, but the war is not over, it's still there. People are dying every day by hundreds. And I think one thing I have to start with is that I don't think I'm in any position to comment. Not only I am no expert, right, in war or in politics, but also because my role compared to people who are actually there on the front line, risking their lives and dying and so on, it's so small, it's so insignificant that I don't know if I'm like if it's my place, to tell anything about it. One thing I can, but I like use this opportunity is to say that the war helped me, and I think many people that I know, discover very, like, really new things about ourselves, right? Maybe shift priorities a little bit, like understand that many things we were worrying about are that insignificant. Also, our overall perception of reality, because, like, our limits of what's possible at what can make sense, like the level of absurdity and chaos in the universe, right? Like, we always, I think we have very strong bias at seeing like logic and coherence and everything in the universe, while universe is fundamentally chaotic. And like things like war teach us about it, right? So things may change so drastically and in such like unimaginable ways any moment, that all our planning, all our thinking, all what we think we understand about reality, it's really naive. At least it applies to me. Like, until the very last day, I couldn't think something like that will happen, you know until it happened. So last thing I want to say about it is that we have two people from our company serving. Like we are in regular contact with them. Of course, like as every company which has any connection to Ukraine and many who doesn't have connection to Ukraine, we try to do like our small bit to help. But it's it goes without saying. But I want to show you one picture. So one of our guys, the sales guy, Vova,
Mm.
he is currently mm, he's currently manning a self-propelled howitzer in the front line. I don't know where exactly, but
Oh,
you cannot know where exactly. And he sent this picture. I don't know if you see what it says.
yes, we can see those
These
rockets.
are these
Are
are
those
artillery
bombs?
shells.
Are
This
the,
is ammunition, basically. It says,
wow.
"YouTeam wishes you all the best. Have fun in hell, motherfuckers." And I would say
Oh.
this is the most, for me, this is the most valuable and like item that was ever branded, and with the name of our company. So I think that it's something that,
Mm,
like, if you are able to help a little bit, that kind of gives this another meaning, right, to your business. And it's these things really matter. Compared to them, other things matter very little. So that's one thing the word teaches you.
yeah. It actually makes me sad seeing that photo. Understand what that means, but that also the way that you team branded product is going to be used for is to, I guess, create real sufferings for other
I know.
human beings living in their own stories
I
as
know.
well.
And
So that makes us
this is a
wonder.
huge moral dilemma. And this forces you to choose, right? Because in one hand, we all want to live in peace. Nobody wants other people to suffer, and so on. But what do you do if you are not given a choice, right? So nobody asked, like, if we want a war, right, in Ukraine. Everyone would say, of course we don't. Who would want war ever? But once this happened, the reality shifts, and I think this is a problem with a lot of opinions which are coming from the West right now, because it's like, you're trying to find a solution in a different system of coordinates where the problem exists. So you are in your system of coordinates.
Yeah,
You are not being bombed every day, right? It's like, and of course, and this applies to everything. This applies to what's happening between Israel and Hamas right now, right? It's not a position to say we just want a peace, because it doesn't solve a problem, and it peculiarly gives the aggressor advantage. Because yes, of course, we want a peace too. Just surrender to us, do whatever we want, and then like there's going to be peace. So you are forced to make this choice, and like in this system of coordinates, you feel yes, this is something that is going to bring suffering to someone, but at the same time, this is something that probably the best thing you can do to prevent much more suffering in much longer period of time. And unfortunately, you have to make this choice. You cannot, because abstaining from this choice is also a choice, and this choice is helping the aggressor in this case.
yeah. Do you think that with your meditative practice, how you're handling the situations or how you view the situation is different from other folks or other family members or colleagues around you?
It's a very good question. It's hard to say, because again, I am in no position to speak about the situation in general. But I, I just remember the first month when the war started. I just couldn't think about anything. I was in the middle of raising Series A for our company, so
Mm,
I think about the year after, I saw where I were dropping the ball, after being introduced to investors and so on, because I sent emails to some and some I just forgot. It was just so insignificant immediately. Like all this Series A, all this business, all these startups, it doesn't matter. I cannot think about it. I cannot possibly like pitch investors. They will not believe me because they will see I really don't care, about what I'm talking about. So,
Yeah.
and yes, at some point, meditation helps because it returns you to this like primary state when you say you kind of revisit this counterintuitive truth that actually you you are in a way that you understand you do not exist, right? So it's just like you're a conceptual model, you're like a game character, and like when you can step back from this game character, even though you have to play, you don't have other choice, right? But you can sometimes step back and look at this character and remember that this is a game character and it doesn't have personality. It's an illusion. So all you have is perception, right? You see all these things, you get them, and then you form these stories, this concept around them, which helps you to explain it to yourself and like try to
Mm,
make useful like agency decisions. And when you have like the worst moments in your life, this is something that happens to bring you back because this is like the last resort. I imagine the other case for me was when my daughter was diagnosed with diabetes, like type 1 diabetes. It was a huge shock for us. We had no idea. It was the day of Y Combinator demo day, actually, and I'm like there in Mountain View at the demo day, like talking to other founders, talking to investors, and then my wife calls me and say, "You have to come back because, like, Charlotte, something is wrong." So I came back, and it was also like just like a few months we came into US, we didn't have health insurance. So we went to the hospital, and
mm,
she is diagnosed with the type 1 diabetes, which is the life-changing diagnosis. But at the same they also bring me a bill for $37,000, which so that was like the first contact with US healthcare system. It was pretty harsh. So I remember that was probably one of the hardest days in my life and one of the lowest points in my life because you get this and also how am I going to pay this? So and I think that was one of the first instances when I meditated, like right there in the hospital. I wasn't meditating systemically right there, but I knew about it. I kind of tried. So I downloaded Calm app and I was just trying because I have to escape somehow. I have to, because otherwise I'm not efficient in my decision making. I have somehow like step out of these shoes. So yeah, I think in like very low points, this is something that makes a lot of difference.
yeah. Now with the regular meditative practice, and you're also now working on a new AI related project. I wonder what's your take with the whole AI boom, and I'm curious about your decision of tapping into the AI space as well.
It's fun because in one hand, if you play a game, you optimize for the most interesting experience, right? So you have this paradigm. Then if things are happening in this game, if I don't know, you see the thrashing past you, you are like in the desert and there is a train and there is something happening, there is music playing, you hear shots, you hear people, in the game that you have to chase this train and jump into it, right? Because this is what this is whole thing about. So I would say this is my take. Like you like one of the ways to try to live like more meaningful life is to optimize for most fun. And if you're doing, what I'm doing, if you're in this sector, you gotta go there because it's most fun, most interesting things are happening, most interesting people are there, the new ideas, the world is changing. You want to be there, you want to make this experience part of your life. So that's from the consumer perspective, like why we are doing what we are doing. But there is another perspective as well, and mm, I remember like I once had a conversation with Trevor Blackwell. which is one of the co-founders of Y Combinator. And it was, I think, after one of the YC demo days. It was in his home in Mountain View, like up a little bit up in the mountains. So this is probably the mountain on which the view is. And he was talking about the origins of AI, like where this whole thing came from, right? Starting from the perceptrons and all the math in 50s and 60s. And like he said one thing which I didn't know, and which like is still, it really turned my whole understanding of AI, the whole AI thing, upside down. So AI is not about building useful agents. AI initially, when people first were theorizing about it, it's about immortality. So it's about creating a substrate for people consciousness. So we can, this is the only way we can achieve immortality, right? If we are able to like step over the physical limitations of our body and find a different substrate which is complex enough and efficient enough, so we can move our brain, our consciousness there, and live, longer. So that was, so the first neural networks, they were built around the concept of full brain simulation. Perceptron is a model of neuron, right? And it's not an accident. It's not just to recreate the brain, it's to recreate the brain with this agenda in mind. So when everyone is talking about either AI taking over the world, or AI, like the like being regulator or becoming a friend and so on, I'm thinking about this, about like this future with immortality, when this is going to become real, when we are approaching, this complexity and sophistication of neural networks, which would make this possible. And this is quite fascinating, I think.
Interesting. So now you're also working on an AI recruiter project called Heart. Would you like to share more about this?
Sure. Heart is because people are the heart of the company, and also because like we have the vision of building something like a super HR oracle, which, so next time you want to hire someone, just listen to your heart.
Ah,
And that's what you do, right? As a recruiter, like I'm a recruiter, you are a recruiter, right? You so you know this too. There is always this like very irrational component in this business. That's why VCs don't like to invest money in recruiting, because they like fintech. They like when everything is engineered, everything is very straightforward, and you can predict stuff. You can basically reduct it to the level of a spreadsheet. But human, we may be already building like the most advanced things we ever did with AI, but it's still a long short from the complexity of human being. So, like what, like the idea here is, well, first of all, it's pretty straightforward. And like it became obvious to me when I went to RecFest in Nashville. It was recruit like one of the biggest recruiters conferences, and like after I pass the registration, the first guy I see is wearing a T-shirt saying "AI will replace you." So that's how our idea came from. It's like, yeah, it kind of, if you're a recruiter, you look at this workflow and you know what's going on, that it's mostly like a lot of like mundane stuff, but then you have these like little things which were unachievable before and not possible to be automated, but now they can be automated. So yeah, that's inevitable. So you either can join the revolution or watch it go by. So we decided to join. But again,
mm,
AI Recruiter is just the first
yeah.
step. Like what I'm thinking as an interesting like opportunity here is to create some kind of a company specific AI. It's like there is this last mile of data, which is company proprietary data, and it's something like big
Mm,
foundational model companies like OpenAI or Google, they don't have access to without your permission. In order to give you to get your permission, you have to like mm, I have to provide you some tools, some useful stuff. So there is this like little chicken egg interplay. And this is interesting because like by building an AI recruiter which makes hiring cheaper and faster, you get this like boot in the door, and you start collecting, you start building this company specific data set. So eventually, I think this is going to become very valuable, because machine learning is mostly about data. Data is the new gold for real. Like the algorithms are pretty straightforward, the math is pretty straightforward. It's all about like what data you can access. So it's interesting to try to get there and like to be among the first who build this company level fine tuning with the data. And recruitment is like our go to market, because this is something we know best. But ultimately, this can be much more general than that.
Yeah. That sounds like a very fascinating and ambitious vision. Sounds like in terms of maximizing the level of fun on your journey, this sounds like a very fun experiences coming up for you in the coming year. So I wish you guys best of luck on this.
Thanks, man.
This is
Likewise, I
amazing.
know you're working in this direction as well with your hiring AI, right? And you are ahead in many ways. So you launched it
Yeah,
already. It's up and running, and
yeah,
it's working. And but this is the thing, right? Like we wanted to talk about competition. So I have this view
yeah,
which is different maybe most of startup founders. I think that amongst startups, competition is a good thing, and you should work with the competition and so on. Why? Because startups, okay, there is this famous Michael Siebel saying, I think that startups don't die of murder; they usually commit suicide. I would add to this, just like I like augmenting the quotes of the great with my own 5 cents. So my own 5 cents here would be, they also suffocate from ignorance. It's like, or neglect. So people just don't care, right? If you're building something new, you got to educate people that this solves your problem. And we are operating in the environment of a very low base trust level and so on. So this is how competing companies actually help each other, because each of them is helping to this like a common good, educating the market, right? Explaining people there is this new way to solve this problem. This is how it works. And like the more companies are there, the more informational activity they create around this topic, the more trust is built. And this is how they're helping each other. Also, this is like trade, right? So Mediterranean Europe was so successful at some point because they had this like pond which facilitated trade at very different nations with different histories, roots, cultures, but they were able to exchange between each other. They were competitors, yeah, they went into war to each other sometimes and so on, but they also extensively exchanged ideas, right? Like, I don't know, like a clock was invented in one part of the world, then math was invented in another, and so on and so on. And then they exchanged it, and everyone benefited. Same thing, right? We are drilling in the same direction. We're trying to solve the same problems along the same lines. So when one of us solves them, all the others have a solution too. And it again benefits. So why wouldn't we help each other do that? Right? I feel it's enough space, at least until we are like Microsoft and Apple, and then we can talk. But since it's like
yeah,
Xi Jinping, right, who was meeting Biden in Philly. I don't know if you saw it. It's not very far from here. Very beautiful place. My wife had a breakfast, had her birthday there once. It's one of our favorite places in Bay Area. So, and Xi Jinping said,
mhm,
the world is big enough for both our nations to succeed. I kind
yeah,
of think this applies here as well.
yeah. That's fascinating. And I guess I want to say that this is a relatively contrarian view to how the typical founders would say. But I think it also has to do with maybe most founders just cannot get over the initial emotional hurdle for the reason people naturally just dislike their competition somehow,
It's an instinct.
somehow,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a fall.
somehow.
Okay, so I have to fight them. But isn't the whole like? isn't the intelligence by definition kind of possessing the tools that make you able to counter all these impulses, right? That's why we are not apes. That's why we're something else. Even though we are still apes, right? 99% of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This is a great view. I think this is something that hopefully most startup founders can really um, meditate deeply on this and be friendly with your competitors even more and help each other. As you said, for most startups, the biggest competition is just lack of usage. Like, nobody care about any of you guys as a default,
This is
right?
much
So
bigger
unless
problem
you guys
than some
are,
competitor doing something actually, and this is your common problem. Well, I hope we can like us can be a living example. Maybe we will motivate someone,
yeah,
to work close
yeah,
together, even though you technically can be competitors somewhere.
yeah. I guess both of us each having a pretty regular meditative practice would definitely be helpful in this regard. I think this might be a good segue for us to maybe for you to share with us, like, how did you start meditating in the first place? Can you share with us about how the journey started for you?
Sure. So again, I think I'm not very original in this. Most of the people, they start meditating and let's say they start self exploration in a broader sense in a low moments in their life, right? So I already gave like one instance, like the worst day of my life, August 18th, 2018, when
Yeah,
my daughter was diagnosed with T1D. I got so I was meditating just out of despair. I wanted to escape, but I couldn't escape because I had to be there in the hospital and so on. So that was the way for me to escape. But then I had another low point, I think in about like 2 years after that, 2020, when like my co-founder left and I was completely exhausted. Like it was amiable in one way, but in another way it was, also multiplied by the huge grind post YC when you're working your ass off, you're trying to get somewhere because you feel like you cannot lose this momentum, so you just cannot give yourself a break. And I remember when we signed the papers, like I had some kind of this conflict energy which was keeping me together. But when we signed the papers, this was gone, and it's like Wednesday, Wednesday noon. I feel like my battery is zero already. So it's not like I cannot work. I
mm,
couldn't move.
mm,
I was just like laying down. All I could do is like lay down. So it was a natural meditation in a way, because I just had no other choice. But like I started then I like went back to Calm. I think I used some Headspace back then, and because it looked like this is something that can make you a little bit happier and can like kind of broaden stuff. I was just thinking about how to like calm myself down, put myself back on track, find some additional energy, and so on. So I think that was the pivotal point for me. Also, COVID, right? Like you have much more time on
mm,
your hands suddenly. Like nothing is going on. You sit at home all the time. So I
yeah,
feel that was one of the reasons for search of this topic, right? And like success of many apps for this and so on. It's like a lot of people were just naturally put in much better circumstances for meditation than they usually are.
yeah. There's a famous saying that 90% of people who would go through the door of spirituality go through the door of suffering. So it seems like there's been multiple episodes of 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 things not going your way that have propelled you on this path.
Absolutely. And I think it's like it's kind of inevitable. So there is
Mm,
right. So I think like in Buddha teaching, there is a lot about it kind of origins from this, right? From recognition that we are kind of creatures that are programmed to suffer. like all the time, no matter what we do. Like there is no answer to this through any action.
mm,
It's just because, like later evolutionary theory pretty much, it's not, let's say, it's not useful for survival and reproduction to be happy. Usually it counters these evolutionary goals, right? So among our ancestors, those survived and had their genes basically fixed in the population, who were more anxious, more angry, less happy in general, who were in constant motion. So this is our
mm,
hardware and our software. We are like very obsolete machines, and we, if anything, we weren't built for happiness. Happiness, it's more like like an odd side effect of consciousness, which was never intended. But we are lucky again to have it, right? To experience something like that, to this kind of bliss, and to have. I think this is basically the main thing that separates us from animals, even though I might be very wrong and maybe they are happy all the time. But I feel like they're not. And it's more like we can go beyond, they cannot go beyond this very short moments of bliss after satisfying their desires before the other desire comes over and they are unhappy again until they do it. We have this chance, we have this opportunity just because we have this like crazy anomaly, right, called consciousness, that we can try, like we can look at the things differently. And it would be a
mm.
betrayal of our evolutionary role, our nature, and so on. It's like getting lottery ticket that wins and never cashing it in. So you got to do something about it, because otherwise you don't fulfill like the very basic part of your potential as a human, like being a little bit more happy than an animal.
Yeah, yeah. So can you share how does your regular practice routine look like? Do you have a regular routine that you default to on a daily or regular basis?
Well, I'm afraid it's not a very like very big or exclusive thing. I'm just trying to meditate. For me, the regularity is more important than the length and so on. Just having a habit of it. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
make at least 10 minutes, but have this. But there is other side of it. So meditation is a formal practice, right? So you sit, you listen to your breath and so on, but you don't need it. In fact, right? You can meditate at any moment. It's like stepping out of your room, stepping out outside. You can do it. The door is open, so you can do it at any moment. Just step outside, breathe some fresh air. No matter what you're doing, wherever you are, the room is still there. It's not going anywhere. You can return at any moment. So I think, like for me, one kind of big change when I felt like I got somewhere on this learning curve was when I realized that you don't need to formally meditate in order to experience mindfulness and all its effects. You can like snap you into this like at every moment. It's like it feels like stepping back. Basically, you can step back and you look at yourself, and yeah, or like stepping into a bigger mind, like realizing that there are other things going on besides your thoughts, and they are all going on at the same time, right? Like you hear stuff, feel stuff,
Hmm.
something is happening in your body, and it's all happening. It's just that your attention is so focused on thought that you don't realize it. But it's up to you. You can switch your attention, you can make your attention broad and see all these things. And it's quite fascinating because it it's like, again, it's like breathing fresh air. It's like looking at a beautiful landscape, like a sunset, looking at a beautiful picture. It's a very aesthetic experience. Why we like music, why we like pictures, and so on, because it connects with us on this intuitive like level. We can explain, oh, I like this picture because this line is particularly nice. No, we just it's because it's a little meditation. It's turns us into, this is the way pull us out of the small mind and show us there is something else, and that is beautiful. But you don't need to go to Louvre, or National Gallery to do that. You can do that with anything. Anything is this picture, anything is art. It just and it's always
Yeah. So for your regular meditations, do you use any mobile apps to help you?
sure. Like I have this waking up app. Here it is. Waking
Waking
Up
Up
by
by
Sam
Sam
Harris.
Harris?
Yes.
Of course.
So it kind of settled with this one. I was trying Calm. Calm is pretty cool, but I would say it's a bit basic and it's a very utilitarian view on meditation. It's like meditate to calm yourself, meditate to something. And Sam Harris goes a little
Yeah.
bit further this way. And also, there is a ton of other useful content. Like I also like Sam Harris's philosophy. I share a lot of things, that he pontificates determinism, like his critique of religion and any kind of limitation of mind and so on. So that also like connects with me.
Yeah.
By the way, they have this new series which I am absolutely raving about. It's called Resilience by Amanda Knox. Maybe if you were following the news, you know who Amanda Knox is. So she was this.
I don't.
So Amanda Knox, I think is in 2007. She was convicted in a murder of her roommate in Italy, in Perugia, which she never committed, and sentenced to 28 years in jail. And she
Wow.
actually spent 8 years in jail before she was completely acquitted. And it's one of those stories when you see the absurdity of the universe, right? Like and in the kind of many levels of foolishness and deceit and so on. And it doesn't make sense because it was so obvious, right? But for 8 years, and she never knew what's going to happen, right? And it was everywhere in the media. She was portrayed as a murderer, and it's really crazy how she survived this and didn't go insane and so on. But she did. She became a writer, and she's writing about mindfulness, and she's writing about her experience, yet speaking about hardships, low points, and so on that we did. She's describing this experience, which I think, and we are all fortunate not to experience anything remotely, like that. And how
Yeah.
she discovered mindfulness and stoicism and like self-awareness, and this helped her not only survive these conditions, not only stay in her sane mind, but also paradoxically be happy, experience these happy moments in jail, in this like solitary confinement when
Mm.
the whole world thinks she is like one of the most evil human beings on this planet. So that's
Mm.
insane. And this is something I'm listening to right now. It's not a like direct meditation thing, but it's like after I have these little sessions every day. I After I drive my kids to school, and I have this 15 minutes
Yeah.
going back home, and I always put something, some content from there. So
Yeah.
this kind of content is really what makes waking up stand apart.
Yeah, that particular segment sounds fascinating and sounds super helpful to founders out there. It really can put things in perspective for our founders who are striving and potentially struggling with daily operations of the company or struggling with the next fundraise. So yeah, having resilience is very important. This sounds like a extremely helpful topic. And at a higher level, I'm also a user of the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. And Sam Harris, he basically changed my life, period, because one of the earlier books that I've read on this path is his
Yeah.
Waking Up book. I think it was published in 2014. Because I grew up in Taiwan, right? So the whole Taiwan, I guess, as a place is quite religious, relatively. There's like religion temples everywhere, but um, I guess religion does not equate to spirituality. And it was very refreshing for me being this Western educated someone using a logical, using their like left brain using to, I guess, going to the door with a relatively scientific approach. I guess that's the kind of messaging that resonates much better
Mhm.
with me. And I'm actually very thankful of Sam Harris's work in this. And that basically opened up a Pandora's box for me because he mentioned about all these different spiritual practices and all these different Western spiritual teachers whom I started to follow, and that actually guided me through the rabbit hole for me.
It's like, yeah, this is. really interesting,
Yeah.
if like if we switch roles and I ask you a question, if it's not too much
Yeah.
changing the plan. But it's interesting because, like, in
Yeah.
my understanding, you come from a culture which historically has much more element, right, of like self-examination and mindfulness and so on, right? Like even the way the religions work, like the philosophy work in the East, it's very different from like a very dogmatic, like Abrahamic religions, right, which are in the base
Mm,
of European culture. So I wonder, like, how did it did this play a role? Did you have, like, in your early days, in your childhood, in your early memories, were there any elements
mm,
of
mm.
this philosophy, this kind of understanding the world that influenced you later?
Right. Right. To be honest with you, so I've had the opportunity to examine deeply in myself as a child, but that's completely independent of the environment where I grew up in. So I grew up in Taiwan. Yes, there are religions in Taiwan, but the most common religion is still it's a mix of Taoism
Hmm.
and Buddhism, and people are generally speaking not they're religious, but they're not spiritual. And when I say religious, I mean people like use incense to worship gods all the time,
Right.
to
Like the
wish
ritual part,
great
the
for to
cosmic
wish
part.
to wish for great to wish for like great fortune and health for themselves
Mm.
and for their families, right? So there's absolutely no concept of being selfless, or it's actually a very extremely dualistic view. So people, so most basically it's like a supernatural type of belief where there are gods and there are ghosts, and the good gods can grant us
Hmm.
fortune if we if we really believe them and then treat them very nicely with all of our primary bird beliefs and treat them nicely, and gods and the ghosts would be the ones that we fear. Maybe some ghosts could also give us the things that we want, but we kind of think of this, it's kind of like demons or the Satan. It's kind of like a traits that we need to be careful about. So we grew up in that kind of environment, right? And if you are a well-educated, logical person, you will think all those are nonsense superstition, where you can where like that's where science would not approve of, right? So there's very little spirituality in the environment where I grew up. I think that's still most the case. The more Western spiritual teachers I encounter, the more I realize that maybe another to sidetrack a little bit. Um, I have this, so if I were to ask you like what's the most popular religion in the world right now, what would you answer?
The most popular religion in the world. I, there must be a
Okay,
twist here,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, there must be this. Okay, yeah.
ooh, I don't
So
know, like Taylor Swift fandom.
you're
Well,
on the right direction. So to me, the answer is the dominant religion in the world right now is
okay,
science,
okay.
right?
Oh, I so much want to argue with this.
Okay, yes, but we can try to. But maybe to allow
Yeah.
me to finish my point is, since that's like the most dominant belief that most people would subscribe to, right? Myself included, right? Because that's how the entire educational system is based on, right? So if you were to speak directly into the minds of most people, you should speak directly in the language of science,
Hmm.
right? Because in many cases, the fundamental belief system, of course, they all start to converge. They all start to converge, so I think that's a good thing. But in some of the cases, the old me, if you were to start telling me all these spirituality reasons why I should meditate, blah blah blah, from a non-scientific direction, I would not be able to listen or believe in you. But because I come through the door of the Western, slightly non-religious door. That's how I'm able to gradually and believe into this more and more.
No, absolutely. And Sam Harris is one of the ambassadors, right, of this approach. So he actually became famous because of the Four Horsemen, right? This video when he is with Richard Dawkins, Tom Hitchison, and there was Daniel Dennett, and like four atheists discussing religion. And it's like just video
Yeah,
of four old guys
yeah,
talking to each other, and it became viral with like 15 million or something views and so on. But just to like reflect on what you said, it feels like being atheist and like putting silence as a cornerstone of your worldview is a privilege, which we should be grateful for. Most of the
mm,
people don't have it, not
mm,
only because they don't have access to the right education or like alternative points of view, but also because they don't have time. Like most of the people, they like struggling
yeah,
every day to put the bread on the table still, right? Even though we live in this post-abundance world and so on, but there is a lot of this stuff going on. So people always need very simple answers, which just and efficient answers. It's like again, like the nature which turned us like make us evolve in these like storytelling and story reading or listening machines. It's not because that's the problem. That's kind of a why science is hard, because science is about seeking truth. It's about finding what's real, and it's about doubting all the time. It's about going great length, putting itself in trouble just to always try to find a better answer. And this is very impractical if you are just like be someone who is trying to survive in this world. We want dogmas, we want ready answers, simple answers to complex questions, even if they are wrong. But they kind of start moving us. And it's very funny how this resonates with a startup, because like when you're building a startup, you
mm,
almost create like a small quasi religion, if even only for yourself. Like one part of you, the scientific and rational part, knows that odds are not in your favor. And this is most probably not going to
mm,
work, right? If you look at all these statistics and so on, no. But at the same time, you kind of consciously like manipulate yourself into believing like a particular narrative. But then the fun starts to happen, because by believing yourself you turn this into a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it like this belief makes
yeah,
you work, it gives you energy, it gives you like this grind and so on. And like sometimes this is exactly what tips the scale, right? And you in this sense you literally bend the reality like this way, by adopting this useful delusion, right? For some point, this is fascinating. It's kind of paradox, but this is one of the foundational stones of the whole startup thing.
yeah. It also echoes a lot of smart people in the industry saying that the best startups are run like religions, right? This just goes to your point that it's almost like if you gather a group of very smart people believing in one thing and turn that belief into reality. That's also like a very logical way for you to put that to frame this
I
concept.
think what matters is if you really believe as a
Interesting.
founder in this. And it becomes actually harder when like with mindfulness. I think this is one of the things that mindfulness makes harder, because you kind of know that this is all like this is just a game. You just chose this story over other stories. And and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like you play in this game, you immerse yourself in this reality, and you like forget about that this is a game for some time. But then like at every point you can just step back and say, yeah, but shouldn't be that much serious.
It's just a
But
game.
then the moral question arises: okay, but when I hire people, right, do I tell this to them, or do I tell this to investors, or do I tell this to
Mm,
someone? Like, is it going to help? So it's kind of interesting paradox about this like story, the storytelling brain and the way we perceive this reality.
right. There's so many things I want to get into that, but maybe before I do that, so I'm curious. So, other than waking up, are there any other books, YouTube channels, or spiritual teachers or spiritual YouTubers, influencers that you recommend other founders to follow or to?
Well, in a broader sense, what also helped me and what I'm grateful for besides mindfulness was stoicism, like discovery. Or I think
Hmm.
it's now
Yeah,
experiencing a huge renaissance, in particular, like in Silicon Valley and some other
yeah,
places of grind. It becomes like really popular, and it's funny because like this is like Stoics originally were like the first coaches, just like Epicureans. Philosophy wasn't about like academic titles and very thick, very big books. It was about how do you actually live your life, right? And like these Stoic philosophers were hired by wealthy Roman citizens and like Athenians to teach their kids basically how to live. And now it's fun how relevant it is, right? How all these, especially, if I could recommend one book every founder, oh, for that said, every human being should read, is Meditation by Marcus Aurelius. I think we already talked about this. Yeah, it's just so unique. It's
yeah.
like it's unbelievable. Like imagine this guy. He was the emperor of the Roman Empire at its peak, at its height. He was the last of the like four good emperors. So he was literally the master of the world. Like by his like the president of the United States combined with the president of China or general secretary, they are far not near, the amount of influence he had comparative to everyone else. And then he's writing this diary, which is not meant to be ever seen by anyone else. He's writing to himself. These are notes. He has this ritual, right? As we all have like these rituals before sleep, after sleep. So he had this ritual before going to sleep to write a little bit of this diary, like any thoughts that he had during the day and so on. And now, and then it was found again by a big accident, like I think about 70 years ago, something like that, relatively recently. And you read it, and it's like a contemporary wisdom. This is something you could expect to hear from a coach right now. It's like so relevant. It's so cool that it also tells you something about human condition, that it doesn't really change. All this technology, all this stuff that we have around, the AI, the internet of things, the mobile phones, we build this whole stuff, but we're still the same meat robots we used to be 2000 years ago, or even 40,000 years ago. So we have the same problem.
Yeah.
I remember we were talking about Sam Harris, and there was recently his interview with Lex Friedman, and they were talking about Elon Musk and colonization of Mars. So I really like Sam Harris's take on
Hmm.
it. He said, "Yeah, yeah, we can go to Mars, but we're gonna be the same monkeys on Mars as we are here, right? We're gonna learn about the first adultery in Mars, the first murder in Mars, the some kind of a political populism, and so on and so forth. So it's like in this Adam Sandler classical sketch, you can go to Italy, but here is the official disclaimer from our travel agency. You are going to be the same sad Joe in Italy. Italy won't help. Like you're going to be the same, said Joe. And that was, I would say, that was one of the best things about mindfulness I ever heard.
That's very well said. My goodness. Yeah, speaking of which, I always have I had this thought. I guess being a startup founder, like many of our fellow founders, like I idolize guys like Elon Musk quite a lot. But after I started on this meditative journey, I come to appreciate folks such as Sam Harris even more. To me, he's just as influential in the internal world as Elon Musk is to the external world. I'm a big fan of Sam Harris's
They're
work,
actually
and
friends.
I
They
think what he's been
they,
doing.
they, they know
Yes,
each other
yeah,
pretty well.
yeah. So that made you wonder why is Elon Musk still seems to be so mind identified and still seems to be suffering so much internally.
It's a very good point. Mm, I think
Yeah.
it's about, the thing that make us like happy. I think this is his mindfulness. It's like one of the things I start accepting
Mm,
like after 35 is that other people can actually see the world and think very different from you. And yeah, I can imagine like someone like Elon Musk who is only happy when he is in the middle of the grind. He just has to be in action, and this is his mindfulness. This is how he reaches, this point of balance for him. So, to it's I think it's but I think I met other people like that, far less successful, right? Because you also have to multiply this with all the layers of luck, that either happen or not. But I I think at least I had these two conversations with startup founders that described it this way, that they have this. One said he had like a really clinical level of ADHD, so he was taking ketamine since he was 7 years old, just to calm him down a little bit and help him concentrate. And he says that the only way he can like remain functional, he just has to grind all the time. Otherwise he feels completely miserable, he has anxiety, and he just cannot do anything, so he has to be working. So I think like Elon Musk probably has like a similar condition, maybe not that, but kind of form of it. And it's fine if it works for him, if it makes him happy, to work on five different companies for a day and then play League of Legends or Diablo for the entire night, which is like his way to
mm,
vent. Then
yeah,
good for him. That's his way.
yeah,
It's okay. There is no universal answer
yeah,
for everyone.
yeah. It's actually a humble reminder for myself where like who am I to judge like whether my way or someone else's ways is better or worse, right? Maybe so of course Elon Musk is like extremely successful, right? But I guess there's always this belief in me where maybe he doesn't seem to be that happy internally. But maybe to him that's perfectly okay. Maybe he's happy with not being happy in
Maybe
some ways.
his
And who
happiness
am I
can
to
be
judge?
different, to yours or mine. But yeah, but talking about success, it's another controversial thing, especially because it's complicated. But I think we like one thing that has to be said is that we as startup founders, especially, just because it's so important for us to believe in our own stories, which center around us, to be the hero, the
Yeah,
protagonist in this book, that we always grossly underestimate luck and like things which in a broader sense are outside of our grasp, right? So we all see the direct luck, which is like I can buy a lottery ticket and either win or not, or I can pitch that investor and they either things come together, I feel right, they feel right, and they give me money, or something doesn't and they don't, and then but we underestimate, but the luck comes in many layers, many layers. It's like there is this book that I'm reading right now by Robert Sapolsky. He's a Stanford professor. He was like teaching apes behavior his entire life.
mm,
So he wrote this book about determinism, which was recently released, I think like 2 months ago, called Determined. And he's describing this anecdote when about some professor, I think in Victorian England, that was given a lecture about the Earth, like the geography, Earth is round, how the gravitation works, and so on. And then after this, an old lady comes to him and says, "Dear sir, it was a fascinating tale, but we all know between me and you that Earth is actually flat and it stands on a turtle, and then that turtle stands on another turtle, right?"
mm,
So, and he said, okay, but what happens then? Then other turtle, other turtle, other turtle, like it has to end somewhere, right? Like, where is this turtle which is just hanging in space? And she said, are you kidding me? These are turtles all the way. So I think this is a good metaphor, basically, to see how the world works. So there are turtles all the way. We see the top turtle, but we underestimate the circumstances. For example, that we were talking about it, right? That made it possible for us to get our level of education, to be in the right time, in the right place, to be, I don't know, in Silicon Valley or in New York or in Taiwan at the right moment of time when you had access to all these technologies, to meet the right people, to have the right genes, to eat the right stuff the day before, something important happened to us, and we and so on and so forth. And it's like, I think this is like an important point about the world to remind ourselves. And like mindfulness, like when you meditate, you kind of connect to this a little bit more, because all this self-centered narrative, it lives in the small mind. It just built this way. When you are able to perceive like there are so many other things happening in the world, you actually get a little bit closer to reality.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue to talk about like integration, like how do we integrate our meditative practice with our, I guess, daily founder's life. So I'm just curious, like how do you think your meditation practice has helped you or has impacted you as how you operate as the founder of YouTeam and Heart?
Mm, that's a very good point. I think, in a very practical way, one of the effects was that at least I hope it's true, I became a better listener. Mm. And this is something that is very, very important if you work with people. Like, again, this goes against the nature of like most of us founders. We like to be heroes. We like everyone to listen to us because we are in the center of the story. But this is very dangerous, right? Because we are not always right. It's more like the opposite. Yeah. So this thing, mm, better listener. Also, I think I became a little bit better at managing my emotions. Like, in particular, anxiety. It's my particular kind of bane. That was with me all the time, like this water in the basement, which always has that little ripple on it. Mm. And it really blurs your lens. It's very counterproductive to decision making. I think that was one of the things that I like particularly aimed at. And for me, the big like revelation that actually things worked. And again, like formal meditation, and like it works like diet or like muscle exercise. Nothing happens, you don't see anything, but then you just one day you realize, oh shoot, like my shape is different, or oh shoot, my shape is different. So it was like when we went to roller coasters in California, Great America. Like, my daughter loves roller coasters,
Hmm.
but I always hated them. I was so scared. Like, I never could go. Like, once I did it on a dare with my wife in San Diego. We'll go there. So I was like bracing myself and so on. But after that, I went to that roller coaster. I think it was like Monterey thing. For the rest of the day, I was like white, like my legs were shaking, and I was, I was really willing to die. If someone proposed to shoot me, I would probably accept. But then I went, like, after, like, recently, after I was meditating, I think for a year and a half on a regular basis, we just went to that roller coaster, which was more or less comparative level of craziness. And I felt like, the biggest fear is before it starts, right? Like the anticipation, like when they also they play on it, they very slowly like drag you there, make a
Yeah.
pause just to, let you marinate in your own adrenaline. And then, so I felt when we sat there, like I did feel this fear, but somehow I was able to look from it at it, not from within, as it's usually like you kind of identify with it. It's just your condition. This is you. This is what you feel. But as something within me, but it's not entire me. So, and that's kind of what, like a basic level, right, of Vipassana helps you. You kind of feel these little things happening, like your breath. How does your hands feel? And you are able to look at these different sensations in your body from a different perspective. And when you look at it, you can see the shape of the sphere. It's like a little pulsing cloud. And then as you observe it, it starts to diminish by itself until it vanishes completely. And I enjoyed roller coaster big time. I was throwing my hands in the air, like something I never did. I had so much
Yeah.
fun, and like since that time, I'm going to roller coasters all the time. Like I never did before. So I think there is this metaphor. So where I'm heading, startup is such a roller coaster. So if you wanna feel more comfortable riding roller coasters, I recommend meditation.
Yeah. It's a very practical, I guess, benefit that you get out of this. So now you get to enjoy going to roller coasters with your loved ones, whereas previously you're extremely fearful about doing so, and that's fascinating. And of course, you get to enjoy, I guess, the metaphorical roller coaster in the start of life. And this is wonderful. So I'm curious, how does your meditation practice impact how you make decisions nowadays as a founder?
It's a very good point because there is always this question of balance in decision making, right? How do you it's like in one hand you can trust your gut all the time and just move by it. In the other, you can overthink stuff and like analysis paralysis and so on. So the truth is somewhere in between. And the problem is you cannot feel that line. Yeah. It's like someone once told me that this is actually a hidden element of this. Is it Tai Chi? I think like when you have this famous, right, symbol with yin and yang, like those two fishes whirling
Yeah.
around each other. So, and there is actually one
Hmm.
part of it that no one can see, and it's the line between them. It's invisible. It exists because it divides them,
Mm.
but it's invisible. And this is Dao, this line. This is like the right path, but you don't see it. That's the whole point. So, but what you can do, you can
Mm.
feel if you are deviating from it somewhere, and you can know in which direction. And for this, you analyze your previous decisions. Where you rather on a too conservative side, or where you rather on a too impulsive side. The problem is most of the if you make this little exercise, you can kind of it's a self-awareness exercise that tells you, okay, this is most likely where you're biased. So you can kind of move your decision making, shift it a little bit closer to this in the direction of this like line of right decisions. But in order to do this entire exercise, you need to step back. You need to have this instinct before doing impulsive decision or before falling into this endless like analysis paralysis. Just stand back and do it. And we always forget, even if we know, right? So I think one thing that gives that like this mindfulness gives you akin to like this helping to conquer fear of roller coasters and so on. It gives you this little like fraction of second of time before reacting. Like it kind of so you have this much higher chance to not to forget to step back at the right moment and like not react immediately. So I would say this is something I experienced, and it was really beneficial to my decision making. There is a good book about it, actually. I wonder if you saw it. It's called 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership.
I think
Commitments
I've
of
heard of that
Conscious
before.
Leadership. Look it up. It's terribly written with terrible examples. It's like so bad. You literally have to struggle to read it, but you still read it because of its content, because it's unique and like so good and so relevant to like what we all as a founders experience. This thing about like this one like half step back before making a decision is from that book. So I recommend it, but brace yourself because it's a terrible writing. It's worth it.
Very useful. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read that. How has your meditation practice influenced your company's culture or how you guys hire people, make decisions as organizations, or how you guys operate?
It's a good point. I again, apart from listening more, better than I used to, hmm, I don't know. It's really hard. I think like one of the big decisions that should have been influenced somehow with a little bit more self-consciousness was my decision to step down as a CEO, right? Not just to like focus on
Mm,
working on the AI product, but also because I believe like I was fortunate enough to find a person who is much better CEO than me for what the company needs right now. And it is a rare luck. I know other stories of other founders who would do the same thing, but they just didn't have anyone to replace them, and they couldn't imagine, finding them and like grooming them for a long time, and then but still, like there is a good video about it from Naval. We were talking about it too, like why you shouldn't be a CEO. I'm not a super huge fan of Naval in general, but this video I really it's like his interview to Matt Mockery. I really recommend. He really gives a very like sane reasoning about it. I believe a lot more founders at certain stage of the company should do the same thing, should like focus on what they do best, product, technology, whatever, instead of clinging to the CEO role. CEO role is tricky, and the bigger company becomes, the more people are, the more complex is, the worse usually you are like prepared for this job as a founder. Like mm, but again, in order to make a decision like that, like willingly, controllingly, I think you need some amount of self conscious. And I think this is what helped me really a lot.
yeah. So now looking back, how do you think your meditation practice has helped you in terms of career growth or personal
It's made
development?
me, there is a book about meditation, one of the first that I read before I actually was meditating. And it's by a TV host who was cocaine addict. And he was absolutely crazy and divorced his wife. And I don't know, like there was a lot of shit going on for him. And but then he was super skeptical about meditation, by the way, because he was interviewing as a TV host several like gurus, I think including Osho or someone else who were like really weird human beings. And he developed a huge skepticism about it. But then when like his own life went really down the hill, he started again, moment of hardship, he kind of started to try it just for fun, just because whatever, I don't care. And then yeah, he ended up writing this book, and the book is called 10% Happier. So that's pretty much what sums
Mm,
up the effect for me. Like I think I did become happier,
10%
yeah,
happier.
in general. It's not because I got a new source of happiness from meditation, but it's more that I started to better see the sources of happiness which were always here. It's like it removed a little bit of blur. Not all of it. It's not like a dramatic thing and so on. But trust me, 10% happier is a lot. It's a palpable difference in quality of life.
I think the writer is called Dan Harris. Is
That
that
I think so. Do you think he's a relative?
is
I don't think so.
Dan
No.
Harris?
So
I don't think so, but I
it's like
think yeah,
largely
yeah.
autobiographical, and the
So
guy couldn't be more different from Sam Harris, as far as I know. Like, yeah, he's a crazy.
yeah. So, so to wrap up this wonderful conversation, I'm curious, like after you have started the practice, do you think this has made an impact on your view on success and personal fulfillment?
Ooh, this is a great question. Yes. Oh, yes, totally. I don't know actually if it's this or if it's just like something that comes at a certain age, but maybe both. But coming back to one of the first questions, like how we started with why do people do startups, right? There is a heroic fabula, but it's more like we're following our instincts. It's usually in a young age when we still cannot explain a lot of stuff that is going on to us. And usually it's like an impulse just to like promote your social status, and this is the way you see it, like creating something, stick it to the man, stick it to them, like do something cool. Like, like feel this moment of glory, right? Like when we won this second prize and everyone was applauding us. So you feel this, you want more of this in your life. But then you realize that, maybe it's not the right goal. Maybe it's not worth all this work and so on, because like this moment is so short. So now I think like result of like kind of re-examining these values and why I'm doing a startup is that I'm not no longer doing this to propagate my social status. At least maybe because these instincts, these impulses, they are nasty, they are very sophisticated, they find their ways, even through like the opposites to themselves. But at least what I feel is that I really want to live an interesting life, an examined life. I want to create interesting experience for myself. That's one thing. And the other thing, I I want to create something useful to other people. So because we are these kind of beings, like our happiness, big part of it is a function of other people happiness. So if we are able to do something which like really helps other people, makes them happy, and we can experience that, then this is another component, right, to living a happier life. So I would say this is how my motivation changed, like why I'm doing this, right? From this pursuit for social status to like a different stuff, which I kind of like more, right? Before, because I feel like it has less controversies in between it. It has, you don't have to sacrifice things. Everyone says it's about sacrificing. You don't have to sacrifice things like relationship with people in this case, right? You don't have to sacrifice time with your family and like being father to your kids and so on, because this becomes just like an element of overall happiness, not a goal which you have to achieve sacrificing everything else. So yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. I think we're running out of time. So before we leave, are there any final messages or any recommendations to other founders who might be interested in meditation that I share?
I don't think I would start meditating because someone told me about it. Maybe it's like a big, I think it's also not for everyone. I also imagine that, for some people, other things might work. Like for Elon Musk, for example, maybe your thing is playing Diablo the entire
Mm,
night, and it's fine, right? As long as it's your thing. But
yeah.
I would say what I would do is like as a founder, I would try to question like why am I doing this? Like this whole like worldview, right, that I have, like why I'm doing what I'm doing. Where does it come from? What kind of stories are woven into me? And that could be an interesting retrospection, and can lead to some interesting conclusions.
All right. Yura, thank you so much for the time. Where can people find you online?
Oh, it's very easy. I have an email, and it's yura@riphyak.com. It's basically my name and my last name. So I was lucky enough to get a domain to my last name. So it's super easy. And I do respond to unsolicited email. So, because I myself also send a lot of unsolicited email, and that's like the way I see karma balance in the world. So please, if you think I can be useful with anything, like hiring, or you just want to share something interesting, or I also like to talk about writing. I'm a wannabe writer, and I like to talk about it a lot. So if you're writing, if you want to bounce some ideas, that's another great thing to talk about. So just email me.
Yeah. Yura. All right. Thank you so much for the
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
It's
We
been
appreciate this.
fun,
All right.
man.
Take care.